Hello, everyone. We're so thrilled and happy to have with us Tracey Gendron, which is my mentor on ageism, but more than that, she is chair of the Department of Gerontology at Virginia Commonwealth University, and she's the author of Ageism Unmasked, Exploring Age Bias and How to End It, which is the topic of the discussion of today. Tracey, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's a pleasure and an honor. Just to be clear, I'm quite emotional by all this thing because following your job for the last at least 10 years has been really great and helpful for me, but I think for all of us. So, Tracey, you have published this amazing book, which I guess, in my humble opinion, is probably one of the best book I have ever read on the topic. And I consider you as one of the 4 master blaster on the topic of ageism. As I always say, every time I go to a conference, I say the same stuff. You are one of the 4. Can you explain in simple terms for the general audience what ageism means, why it matters, and what after 53 years that has been, let me say, coded as a discrimination has changed, if anything has changed?
Yeah, those are great questions. And thank you. I have had the honor of watching you over the past 10 years as well and seeing your growth and all of the things that you have accomplished in ways you've contributed to ageism. So I feel the same. And I think I'm going to use Master Blaster. I like that. And I think I might actually use that now. So ageism is a great topic. And it's a great topic for me because it means that it's about everybody. I always say there's no such thing as a non-aging person. We are all aging. So ageism is relevant for all of us at all stages of our life. And I think that's one of the things that make it so powerful. I think when people think about ageism, they tend to think about older people and they tend to think about discrimination in the workplace. And that is a piece of it, but it is so much more than that. It's about how we view people of different ages. It's about how we see ourselves as an aging person. It's about how we communicate about what it means to age back and forth to each other, how we role model what it means to age. It's within the structures of our society. It's within our laws and our policies, and it's actually built into the physical environment. When you think about the fact that we typically segregate people based on age, it's built into the foundation of how we build our cities and build our societies. So ageism is, most broadly discrimination based on age. It's when one person either stereotypes or distributes prejudice or discrimination or a judgment against somebody because they are differently aged than they do. And there's, power differentials that are there. It's damaging. And this is the thing that most people don't yet know. We have a lot of information, public health information, about what is bad for us, what our risk factors are. So we know smoking is bad for us. We know that not exercising is not good for our heart. We know that poor diet can lead to bad outcomes. We even know that not wearing sunscreen could put us at risk from skin cancer. But what we don't talk about, and yet we know, is that how we feel about ourselves as aging people has consequences. So people that internalize that fear of being older and dread becoming older actually are more at risk for the development of all kinds of diseases. And they heal slower than people that feel positively. They are more at risk for cognitive issues. They are more at risk for even hearing impairments. And if it's not enough, there's also a 7.5-year gap in longevity. So people that fear their own aging live on average 7.5 years less than people that embrace that. I can't think of a bigger consequence than that. And yet that's not something that's widely known. So ageism, I think really keeps us locked off from envisioning our future possible selves because it keeps us stuck in a youth-focused mindset where we value what it means to be young, how it looks to be young, instead of thinking of aging as a developmental process that includes growth and that includes development. And where the older we get, actually the happier we become and the more comfortable we become in our own skin. That's the story less told. So, you know, all of this is ageism, and it's all really complicated, but there's a lot of reasons why it matters. And I think for people to focus on their why does this matter to you, is the place that we need to start.
Listen, after, as I said before, this 53 years, do you think something changed since Butler coded as a discrimination? What is happening?
I do. I think a movement is underway. And I think just the fact that you can identify off the top of your head 4 master blasters, 4 names of people who have been doing decades of research, who are doing advocacy work, who have made this their life's work and life's passion, shows you that a movement is underway. So we know more about ageism now, and it gets more media attention than it ever has. So in 53 years, we have come a long way. We still have a long way to go, but our community of people that is really dedicated to bringing awareness to this is growing every day. You know, you're part of the movement. Every one of us that has this conversation is a meaningful part of the movement. So yes, I feel actually really optimistic that we are headed in the right direction. And 53 years later, while we still have work, we definitely have made progress.
So just to be fair with the other 3 master blasters, let's name them. 2 are
Yes.
academics, Professor Leah Tayalon, Professor Becca Levy, obviously. One is not an academic, but her work was so important because it opened the door of ageism, which is Ashton
Applewhite has been a fierce advocate.
Absolutely. So the point is that, anyway, every time you bring such a topic, which is deep and delicate somehow, to, let me say, to a broader narrative, anyway, you sometimes generates counter effects. You say something very interesting in your book, which that's why I think this book is so important and relevant, because it's stepping forward about, let me say, a now well-established somehow, quite still a little too much academic in my opinion, but well-established narrative around ageism. So many others are stepping in, you know, advertising is stepping in, communicators are stepping in, but sometimes we just make a kind of a step that it's leading us in a sort of a gray space. So when you say, for example, the terms are like ageless, feel young, you're only as old as you feel, never get old, that sounds like let me say, the top narrative as anti-ageist narratives. In reality, they are not. You say something very powerful. You say is using strategies that downplay or ignore the aging process to fight ageism is like putting out a fire with an extinguisher filled with kerosene. Meaning that, what do you mean with this thing? What is the let me say, the edge on top of which we can define if it's right or wrong? Because I completely get the point. Age matters.
Yes.
Age
Yes.
matters. So it's sometimes try to avoid and going beyond because it could be considered as discrimination is not the right way to go. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yes, and thank you for bringing it up, because I think it's a trap that we fall into repeatedly. When we use terms like ageless, for example, ageless essentially denies age, but we need to embrace age. It's a meaningful part of our identity. It's a meaningful part of our lived experience. So we don't want to actually be ageless. We want to embrace the age that we are today and continue to embrace all of the ways that we're going to become in our future ages. When we say things like never get old or don't feel old, we are actually stigmatizing what it means to be old. So to use that as an anti-ageist strategy actually makes no sense. We need to reclaim old, not as a good or bad, but just as a state of being. Old and young are not filled with judgment. They don't need to be. They are just, one is long-lived and one is shorter-lived. So just to kind of have it as a neutral place of I am old, and to accept old and to say that's okay, there's actually benefits of being older, is a far better way of addressing ageism than kind of putting a Band-Aid over it, so to speak. We put a bandage over our shame. We put a bandage over our fear. So when, let's say, we identify as I'm 51 years young, or no, I'm 51 years old, or to say I'm not old, I'm seasoned, or I'm experienced, or I'm vintage, that's still covering up the word old with shame. And it still means that you are feeling as if that is being stigmatized and you don't want to identify as old. The goal of anti-ageism is to embrace the old, to be old, and for old to be okay. So we really need to be careful about these anti-ageist strategies that we use. And if in any way we are denigrating being old or stigmatizing it, then it's not really doing what you're intending for it to do. So it's time for us to be really careful. Even just the term anti-aging, what does that even mean? What does it mean to be anti-aging? Aging is living, aging is growing. How can we be anti? And if you take another descriptive, like would we have an industry that was anti-gender or anti-race or anti-religion or whatever it may be? We wouldn't, because people would feel offended by it. So as well, they should. So then you should feel offended by age as well, because it means it's stigmatizing the whole process of age. So I think we really need to start thinking about the language that we use and being very careful about how we use these strategies in the right way.
I think you're saying so many important things, and already there is a list of tools in what you're saying that we quickly should have to bring to communicators, to the mass media, tools working in marketing, because again, the feeling that we all have, they're already going probably with good intention, but recreating a stereotype that probably we'll see developing quite soon, and then we're not solving anything, because obviously we're bringing all this cultural heritage, which is why we're here today discussing, which also makes one of the main things and points that you are clearly explaining in the book. That's again why is a crucial reading. For example, the difference about senescence and aging, and we keep on matching these two processes in our life, which are very different, but we just make them as one, and then we take all the negative aspects of one, forgetting what is the beauty of the process of aging that you described so clearly in the book. One thing I really liked about the book is what you put in it through your life experience, to your family experience, to the journey of life, the journey of the people around yourself in your inner and outer circles of your life. So can you tell us a little bit about the process of writing this book?
Yes. As you know, a book or any kind of labor of love really takes years. So it's, years. It's all in your head for a long time. And then it takes, I think, an inspiration to kind of find your path forward. How do I want to tell this story? Because there are so many ways that we can tell this story. So for me, one of the points of inspiration was definitely my grandparents, and I write about them quite a bit in the book, because I was one of the fortunate people that had positive role models for aging. So I look to them a lot, and they are my source of inspiration for truly what it means to age into elderhood, and to have a meaningful life at all ages and stages. So they were my inspiration for that. On the other side, a couple of years ago, right when COVID started, and we entered this space of a pandemic, a global pandemic, I'm sure you noticed the rise of ageism was sharp, and it was everywhere. So we started to see so many sentiments, very ugly sentiments of people not caring about the disease because it only affected older people, or people disparaging younger people that they weren't adhering to protocol. There was just ageism everywhere. And that really motivated me to say, I want to fully understand how we got to this moment in time. And that is when I kind of figured out that I wanted to take a historical view of ageism and to walk through history to say, these are all of the factors that got us to this moment in time. These are all of the things that have happened and events that have happened that have built those bricks that I talked about, that have brought us to this very ageist place. And because ageism is so very invisible, it's so common, it's just all around us, it's the air that we breathe, I think understanding how we got here is the key to understanding how we don't repeat those patterns and we create a new path forward. So COVID really was an inspiration in that way. And yeah, and it was time to just sit and write that book and get that down.
The book has been published literally a few weeks ago. And we're so happy to be between the first just to interview about the book. But do you have any feedback already about the book? I'm sure there will be positive feedbacks, but
Yes, yeah, it's been wonderful. I'm having a great time. I think it has definitely been getting some positive feedback, definitely getting some attention. I love hearing from people who have read it or are reading it about some of the aha moments that they have, knowing, what is it that's really resonating with you in there. For some people, I've heard it's about social isolation and how the connection between ageism and social isolation. For some people, it's just fully understanding the breadth and scope of ageism. But yes, I love the feedback, and I'm excited to hear more as people read it.
So if you can literally list 3 things you would like people to take away from your book, what these 3 things would be?
The first is that we are all aging. As I started to say, ageism is about all of us, and aging is about all of us. Second, really understanding that difference between aging and senescence, and not just the terms. I don't care about the terms, but understanding that aging is not a process of decline. Aging is a process of decline and growth and maintenance and adaptation. And it happens in our bodies, in our psyches, in our social roles, and in our spirituality. So to really have people embrace the holistic nature of aging and to stop thinking of aging as a sole process of biological decline is really important to me. And then I think to see age as one of the most important aspects of our identity. We talk a lot about intersectionality. We talk a lot about race and class and gender identity and sexual orientation as meaningful parts of who we are. Ages as well. And it's one of those that actually changes over time. The way we respond to the world and the way the world responds to us changes depending on how old we are. So to bring some awareness to that, and that this matters to your health, this matters to your longevity, this matters to the economy, this matters to business, this matters to having equitable societies. So to find that source of motivation, recognize that this is about me, and then to retrain myself on what aging really is, I think is where the power is.
Which leads to my last question, Tracey. Let's say is that complaining about some discrimination that we all recognize as awful, sometimes it's not so evident, but anyway, let me say it's easy. We can recognize it's awful, it's a bad thing, we're all on the same side. Then differently, just take action. So what organization like us, we're really happy to listen if you have any advice on how we can do better, but others, what we can do, not only us, obviously, but in general, to fight about this, against this discrimination, to make the narrative they are suggesting becoming the narrative and not one of the narrative.
Yeah.
What other suggestion you could give us?
Yeah, well, first I'll say I think that you are all one of the role models for how companies can harness the power of intelligence and innovation while also advancing equity and inclusion. It doesn't have to be one or the other, and you demonstrate that it can be both and that you can have a business model based on both. So I think that there's a lot of power in that and power in being a role model. So I appreciate all that you do to bring that to light. And then I think we can all work on calling out ageism wherever and whenever we see it. And whether that's in the personal space, in our own relationships, whether that's in conversations, or whether that's in the public space, I think raising awareness is truly the key to catalyzing change. And that movement does happen one person at a time. So to build this community, you and I are very fortunate. We got to know each other a few years ago, and now we build community because we're in this together. And to embrace all of the other people that continue to come into this space, I think is how we're going to build the movement. But it also takes knowing in your everyday and having the courage to call it out when you see it. It's both of those things.
So Tracey, thank you so much for being with us. If you want many aha moments, buy Tracey's book, because it's really probably the best path you can do in your life today if you want to understand what is happening around one of the most unknown and still hidden discrimination that is happening to society, by the way, to one of the most relevant demographic phenomenon and trend happening to our planet together with the climate change. Tracey, thanks for your work. Thanks for being with us. We can't wait to have you here in Newcastle, as we hope to host you. So stay tuned. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much.